Crossovers are everywhere these days. It seems like the norm now for properties to merge, whether it be in movies, comic books, TV shows, video games, or cartoons. Years go into making sure respective franchises are blended together in a way both fans and studios can get behind, with consumers getting the chance to witness their favorite characters interacting with each other, and the studios reveling in their millions, and in some cases billions, of dollars for their hard work. How boring. Not really, but with how much reverence these modern day mashups are treated with, there's something special about the subject of our video, Bambi Meets Godzilla, a 90-second black and white student film that delivers exactly what its title promises. And if you think it sounds more like a joke, rather than a legitimate meeting between two animal powerhouses, you'd be completely right. Sort of. I remember being a kid watching it, unable to comprehend how this self-contained short could even exist. I would go months and years without seeing it on TV, beginning to question whether I had actually witnessed it or merely dreamed it up. But every once in a while, I would catch it again on TV, restoring my faith that it did in fact exist, but only growing the enduring mystery in my mind even more. What started out as a shocking and frankly hilarious animated feature has had a long-lasting impact on pop culture too, with connections ranging from Snow White to Monty Python. Intrigued yet? Let's look at the cultural footprint left behind by Bambi Meets Godzilla. To most effectively discuss the history and legacy of Bambi Meets Godzilla, we should look at the film itself first. That way we can gain some context and perspective on what we're watching and understand what the legacy would be based off of. The movie begins with Bambi grazing in a field in black and white, to the song Call to the Dairy Cows. There's no background, it's just white paper, with a slanted horizontal line and some flowers strewn over some blades of grass. Bambi isn't akin to the Disney model. You don't get the hair or the big eyes. It's a cartoon deer that's Bambi in name only. But you only really need the deer to be called Bambi to get the point across. For the purposes of the video, it's completely serviceable. As Bambi moves his head and legs while eating the grass, the title appears in the corner of the screen with the word Bambi in a bubbly font surrounded by flowers and Godzilla in a nice solid flat text. The visual of the title gives us an almost subliminal representation of each of our main characters. The title ascends off screen, and as it does, the credits begin to roll, with Bambi moving his foot and periodically raising his leg and head. If you read closely, the credits are ridiculously silly in an endearing way. We see the screenplay was composed by Marv Newland, choreography by Marv Newland, and a few more, my favorite being the final one, which I won't give away here. As the credits conclude, Bambi raises his head one final time before suddenly, Godzilla's foot stomps down onto Bambi, rendering him completely flattened to the sound of what resembles someone pressing on all of a piano's keys at once. All we're able to see of Bambi are his flattened legs as Godzilla's foot remains on top of him, and we get the words, "The End," in small type font next to Godzilla's foot. As those words disappear though, they're replaced by a thank you statement reading, "We gratefully acknowledge the city of Tokyo for their help in obtaining Godzilla for this film." The message leaves the screen and Godzilla's pointed toenails extend out before retracting back into place, then the screen fading to black. And that's it. That's Bambi Meets Godzilla. So now that you're familiar with this movie, I imagine there may be some questions you have about it, such as, what is it? Where did it come from? And how on earth does it exist? Let's start at the beginning. The story of Bambi Meets Godzilla begins in Oakland, California on March 9th, 1947, with the birth of Marv Newland, who after high school attended the Art Center College of Design in Los Angeles, California. This leads into our first question. How did the film come about? In a sit-down with Vantage Point interviews, Newland explains, quote, "The film had to be made in order for me to receive a passing grade in my 4th year motion picture production class, and therefore to qualify to graduate from the Art Center." Not previously knowing anything about this movie, it's funny that this cult hit came to be from a school assignment. But what about the connection between Bambi and Godzilla? Was there any significance in the subject choices? His answer would be yes, in a loose way. I've been a fan of Godzilla movies since I was a young man. The original Godzilla I first saw in the North American release of the film, with scenes of Raymond Burr edited into the original movie. Many of the others, Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster, Mothra vs. Godzilla, and Destroy All Monsters, I watched on television. My favorite Godzilla movie is the first Godzilla movie. My favorite Godzilla movie title is Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster. End quote. So we've established the relationship to Godzilla, but what about Bambi? This is where the premise for the entire film comes from. A joke. An actual joke Marv Newland used to tell. The verbal joke was simply asking someone if they want to hear the soundtrack to the world's shortest movie. I gave a high-pitched squeal of fear, followed by a low-pitched deep roar or growl. The recipient would ask something like, "What's that?" And I would say, "Bambi Meets Godzilla." I've heard stories where people that create animated shows do it at the last minute. Matt Groening famously was going to pitch his comic strip Life in Hell as an animated show, but fearing it may ruin his strip, came up with the idea for The Simpsons in the waiting room before his pitch meeting. Even Danny Antonucci created Ed, Edd n Eddy on a dare that he could create a children's show. But this is the first time I've ever heard a film created based on a joke, one that the creator had come up with, no less. And as to why it was as long as it was, the original concept was stretched to last about 80 seconds longer in order to make the final 90-second long movie. Most of the extension was made up of credits. The verbal joke idea for the film had to be stretched to at least 90 seconds in order to be considered a film. The way he does it is genius to me. It's constructed like a perfect joke if you think about it. Newland admits that the joke is actually about 10 seconds, so he needs to pad it with 80 additional seconds. And like a comedian with great timing, he doesn't allow any second to be wasted space. Start at the top of the movie, where we open on Bambi eating in an empty field. We have the title, but immediately after we get the credits scrolling, the credits are a joke in themselves, providing their own entertainment and creating build-up, with Bambi continuing to nip at the grass on the side. It's also a brilliant way to keep Bambi moving, giving him life but never having to animate more than a few frames, since he repeats the same motions, meaning he spends less time animating. And for a one-person job, which this was, anything to save time and resources is invaluable. The credits are entirely accurate. I failed to give myself a credit for camera or craft services. The animation was about 50 crude drawings, including Godzilla's foot. All of this artwork was made in a couple of days. It almost took more time to shoot the film than to make the animation art. The credits were made using Letraset on a long sheet of clear acetate, which was destroyed in the shooting process. This production method resulted in no title art left over after the movie was shot. All of the deer and Godzilla foot animation still exists. End quote. As much as I wish the entire original credits were intact, the fact that all the Godzilla and Bambi cells are still around warms my heart. This bit of animated history is still preserved. And if you're interested in an additional bit of trivia citing a Disney connection aside from the obvious Bambi, Newland reveals the movie was made in a home rented from Adriana Castelletti, who was the voice of Snow White in the original Disney feature film. How amazing is that to hear? It's not like she was an active participant and likely had no idea what was being concocted in her rented out property, but the fact that she's even a footnote in this unlikely story, that's a pretty special honor. Now previously I had mentioned that Bambi did not appear remarkably close to the Disney version, and in Newland's own estimation, Godzilla didn't either. Quote, "No reference was used, only the visual memory of the film's director was used, which is easily seen to be flawed in the case of both the design of Bambi and of Godzilla." And as to why Godzilla's toenails move, Godzilla's claws curl at the end because the picture had to be slightly longer, and I wanted to give some life to Godzilla's foot, which was only one drawing until the claws moved. That's a concept I hadn't considered before. Not the extended runtime, I understand that completely, but the idea of claws moving. It's completely ludicrous, but even though Godzilla's foot has life in it technically, we never see it move aside from a still shot of it coming down. So having the claws extend and retract does offer signs that there is a living entity beyond what we're able to see. And if you'll recall that loud, extended bang of piano keys heard when Godzilla's foot slams down, it has a bit more story behind it too. It's actually from the Beatles song A Day in the Life. Quote, "The slowed down note from A Day in the Life was sampled from a vinyl LP at the sound recording company where the optical track was made. They were very kind to a know-nothing student movie maker who did not realize at the time how soundtracks had to be recorded, edited, mixed, and then made into optical tracks. All this was kindly done at the sound production company." I can't even begin to fathom why the sound company would use that note from the Beatles song. It's a unique tidbit of information, but with the way litigation works, especially with the most famous band in history, he's lucky that it was at a time when legal rights weren't as closely monitored as they are now. But what about Toho, who holds the rights to Godzilla? Or Disney, possibly the company that most closely guards their intellectual properties? On hearing from the two companies, there were reportedly no complaints from Disney or Toho. They may see the animated short as a promo for their grander productions. The only positive feedback from Disney or Toho has been their lack of response to the film. Bambi Meets Godzilla's first public screening was on local Los Angeles television, The Loman and Barkley Show, on April 13, 1969. Quote, "The film seemed to take on a life of its own from the initial exposure. It made people laugh and was included in many animation shows and theatrical packages. Bambi Meets Godzilla was made popular in independent cinemas in North America via a theatrical package put together by Specialty Films in Seattle, Washington. They combined the feature film, King of Hearts, and two animated shorts, Thank You Mask Man and Bambi Meets Godzilla. The film was also screened in other animation packages, such as Festival of Animation and Spike and Mike's Sick and Twisted animation compilations. Pyramid Films and Co-Films distributed the picture to schools and universities, and there were television sales all over the world. Bambi Meets Godzilla was made before I knew about animation festivals in Europe, Japan, and Canada, and it was never entered into festivals and won no prizes. This is surprising because I've never heard of the movie being available anywhere. I had just seen it on Cartoon Network sporadically, and it's this strange case of a movie's popularity growing through these minor distributions. It seems like it'd be a perfect complement before a feature-length film in a theater, but it was only ever made available on these cassette tapes, of which I've never heard of personally. The lack of being in any sort of festivals more than likely limited its exposure to the general public. The factor of it being relatively unknown leads into what may be the most out-of-field tale, that if true, it's something you won't be able to unsee. Now, if you're familiar with Monty Python's Flying Circus, then you know perhaps their most famous visual gag, the Monty Python foot. It comes down out of nowhere and squishes anything below it. Do you see where I'm going with this? According to Newland, Terry Gilliam took me out for lunch in London, England years ago and confessed to having lifted this foot stomp gag from Bambi Meets Godzilla for the Monty Python animation. Assuming this story is true, it is a massive revelation. It would possibly track too, since the first episode of Monty Python didn't release until October of 1969, giving a few months of time for the movie to have been viewed. It doesn't change Monty Python's own respective legacy, but that it was directly inspired by Bambi Meets Godzilla is quite the declaration and a testament to how ingenious it is comedically. The tale of the tape comes full circle during the home release of Godzilla in 1985, in which Bambi Meets Godzilla was included as an additional featurette. much to the joy of Newland. I was thrilled to have Bambi Meets Godzilla included in the home video release of Godzilla 1985. Not only was my movie in the same package as a real Godzilla live-action feature, but the people who were supposed to sue me paid for the use of my film. As the years have passed, Bambi Meets Godzilla has maintained a level of cult popularity, and deservedly so. It's a favorite for animators to remake in numerous different styles, but none having the involvement from Marv Newland. Critically, the short film has a high level of acclaim in its own right. It was ranked number 38 in the book, The 50 Greatest Cartoons, as selected by 1,000 animation professionals, and in 2008, it was selected to be enshrined in the Academy Film Archive, which is dedicated to preserving motion picture history. As Marv Newland remembers, one of the archivists took us into the room where the original film negatives and printing negatives were examined and restored. Seeing that experimental film being carefully prepared for the archive made it clear that the Academy was also interested in independent and abstract movies. I was honored to have them include Bambi Meets Godzilla in their archive. Since then, they have inducted 3 more of his films into the archives. While it would be understandable for Marv Newland to rest on his laurels and call his student film lightning in a bottle and go on to pursue other passions, his legacy would be secure as is. Instead, he used the traction gained from his short film to turn his love of animation into a lifelong career. And rather than resenting it, he is fully appreciative of the opportunities it's afforded him. Quote, "If Bambi Meets Godzilla had not achieved the success it received from the time immediately after it was released up until today, I feel certain I would not be living a life in animation. The movie helped me to get my first job in the movie-making business and has provided an ongoing patina of notoriety, which has allowed me to obtain grants or funds to make many more animated pictures. None of this do I take for granted." In an interview with I'm Probably Wrong About Everything, Marv Newland is asked, "What is the best thing for a human being?" To which he answers, "The best thing for a human being is to love what you're doing." And over 50 years later, after an assignment that jump-started his life's dream, he still is.